This is our 5th time.
I wouldn't have dreamt of what I learned here.
This encourages you and inspires you, and it's so relaxing, and the food is great.
I love Retreat at Sea, and I will do it again.
And you should be here.
Holy Trinity is at work full time here.
The African Coalition Against Blessing Same-Sex Couples has now split into Africa's European bishops, opposing hundreds of Africa's African bishops. Join us with the latest from the Eternal City, Church Militant's Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomes. Jules, just a couple days ago, we reported on a statement from the president of the Pan-African Association, Cardinal Fridolin Ambongo Bisunga, that he's affirming that Africa was united, completely united, in opposing the declaration Fiducia Supplicans, calling for the blessing of couples living in sin, blessing them as couples. Now, that's no longer the situation in Africa?
Brad, it looks like the African bishops have split along racial lines, black and white. And just recently, a couple of days ago, in fact, the North African Bishops' Conference, which consists of 10 ecclesiastical districts, they issued a statement distancing themselves from their brother bishops. Now, the North African bishops are almost entirely white, of European origin, and they came out with a statement, and the person leading the North African Bishops' Conference is Bishop Jean-Paul Vesco, and you can see him in the picture there embracing a Muslim imam. And this conference of North African bishops basically said that they would support Fiducia Supplicans and the blessing of same-sex couples.
Now, even before moving on, Jules, that picture there was embracing an imam, the Muslims are actually against blessing same-sex couples, are they not?
Well, absolutely, and we will talk later about that in the show.
Okay, so what are the North African bishops specifically saying there, Vesco being their spokesperson, in their opposition to their brother bishops in all the rest of Africa over this Fiducia Supplicans?
Well, what they are saying is that the document, the declaration, Fiducia Supplicans, gives us a deeper understanding of the meaning of blessings. And they're also saying that this is not a doctrinal revolution, but it is, to quote them, an invitation to reevaluate the path of discernment. And that is why they are very enthusiastic about implementing the declaration in their regions.
Yeah, if it's not a doctrinal revolution, at least it's a pastoral revolution. Can you recap for our viewers what Cardinal Ambongo said, Jules, on behalf of the whole of Africa, just a few days ago, reported on Rome Dispatch on this very topic of absolutely rejecting same-sex blessings?
Well, Cardinal Fridolin Ambongo Bisunga said very clearly, first of all, that this went against Catholic teaching. It went against a universally accepted moral code. He also then said, he heads, by the way, the Symposium of Episcopal Conferences of Africa and Madagascar, and he said that Africans cannot take the risk of exposing African Catholics, of exposing their brothers and sisters across the continent to scandals. And he also said that this is in direct contradiction to the cultural ethos of African communities.
Now, Jules, before we move on here, it just come into my mind, Cardinal Fernandez, who wrote Fiducia Supplicans, he wanted to just kind of write off the whole African continent, all the bishops down there who are rejecting this in unison there, as Cardinal Ambongo said, because, in his statement, he trying to, well, one, they can't read, they don't understand what I'm saying, came out. But the other thing was, the main point he was making was it's against their laws, and therefore, it's illegal down there, I understand, and all that. But what Abango is saying here is no, it's against Catholic teaching, and we don't want to scandalize Catholics in seeing this type of thing. He on the third line, it's against our cultural mores, but that also was rooted in Catholic teaching. He's not bringing up just, well, it's the law down here, so we can't implement it, otherwise we would. Your thought on that, on how Fernandez kind of recapped their, falsely repainted their situation?
Well, Fernandez was engaging in damage control after they really slammed his declaration. And of course, he, recounted what Pope Francis has said very often, that criminalizing homosexual behavior is both a sin and an act of injustice. And Fernandez said, well, we can understand why they are not doing it for the time being, but, the day will come when he's given them time for reflection and discernment, but the day will come when they will have to implement it because it is a declaration of the papal magisterium.
Okay, well, Jules, can you tell us a bit more about these North African bishops who are not in step with their fellow African bishops down there? What countries specifically, again, can you recap for us? And how many Catholics are they actually leading or misleading in Northern Africa?
Well, they aren't misleading a huge number of Catholics, because the Catholic population is tiny in these countries. Remember, once upon a time, North Africa was almost entirely Christian. Christianity just spread across North Africa. And our viewers will know that St. Augustine of Hippo came from Tagaste, which is in Algeria. And of course, Clement of Alexandria, the Pope Victor I was born in Carthage in the 2nd century. We have Tertullian from Carthage. But now the Christian population, the Catholic population in particular, is tiny there, which is why they don't seem to have indigenous African bishops, by and large. And these countries are Libya, Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, and Western Sahara.
Now, Jules, you wrote an article about Bishop Vesco from Northern Africa there some time ago, I believe, right? Can you recall why he made headlines back then?
Well, we pointed out how Bishop Jean-Paul Vesco had literally called for a moratorium on evangelization in Algeria. He said that in this overwhelmingly Muslim nation of Algeria, Catholics need to get rid of the idea that we have to evangelize and bring people to our truth. I mean, let me quote him again. We've got to get rid of the idea that we have to evangelize and bring people to our truth, as if there are different, your truth and my truth. Simultaneously, he said, we must accept that there is perhaps also in Islam a part of the truth that escapes us. And he commended Pope Francis's revolutionary approach to Islam and talked about how Pope Francis has replaced evangelization with fraternity. And, a lot of people I spoke to from that part of the world, because I am in touch with missionaries who operate there, they were scandalized, to put it mildly.
Well, Jules, there's a left-wing Jesuit, sorry for the redundancy there, left-wing Jesuit, priest Father Thomas Rees, painted this as a racial story and was being thus labeled as a racist in the social blogosphere out there. Can you unpack that whole thing for us?
Brad, Father Tom Rees published this article on Tuesday. And basically what he said that, why are we so obsessed with sex? Jesus, after all, wasn't obsessed with sex. And, the common argument, Jesus said nothing about homosexuality. Well, my response is he didn't need to say anything about homosexuality. He didn't say anything about, pedophilia and bestiality, for that matter, because Jesus was a Jew faithfully practicing the Torah. He kept the law, and and he upheld the law. He came to fulfill the law. And the law very clearly condemns homosexuality, bestiality, incest, etc. So there was no need for Jesus to keep repeating himself and tell the Jews. He was primarily addressing the Jewish people, what they already knew and believed to be the word of God. But Father Tombries also went on to kind of portray this as a black and white affair, and quite a few respondents on social media rather unfairly called him a racist, because let me quote him. He said this: beside the moral question, the African hierarchy sees the push for LGBTQ rights as a form of neo-colonialism. In addition, if the church begins welcoming gay people, they fear they may lose followers to Pentecostal and evangelical churches whose ministers would attack them for being gay-friendly. Well, Father Tombries is absolutely right there, which is why, only yesterday we were told that senior Vatican officials are wondering why the dicastery for evangelization, or rather Professor Massimo Fagioli asked why the dicastery for evangelization was not consulted before issuing this declaration.
Jules, I'm not sure. I do believe it's a white or black issue. I really think it has to do more with Europe's Protestantized take on Catholicism and Africa's missionary take on Catholicism. And so I'm going to ask you, Jules, why do you think these bishops in northern Africa are following the path of other European bishops in their support of blessing same-sex or adulterous couples as couples, rather than aligning themselves with their fellow bishops in Africa who staunchly oppose blessing couples as couples who are living in sin?
Well, it's very interesting that you mentioned Protestantism, because it is primarily the Protestant churches in Africa growing like crazy, and many of them are drawing sheep from Catholic churches because they continue to stand firm on biblical truth, and they continue to, declare very, very categorically that homosexuality is a sin. Now, this is primarily reflected in the Anglican Communion, where the white Western bishops completely sold out to the LGBTQ agenda, and the only people in the world to oppose them, as a bloc, were the Anglican African bishops, and they continue to do so. Now, the question that you're asking is also very interesting, because Father Michael Julia, the priest who serves as the Secretary General of the Regional Episcopal Conference of North Africa, he said, when the bishops issued the statement, he said that in North African society, same-sex unions are inconceivable, and the positive reception of fiducia supplicans is therefore more theoretical than practical. So, people are wondering, why support it in the first place? Why not ally yourself with your black African brother bishops?
Yeah, the whole spin about it being theoretical or practical, it's really the practical aspect of it. How is it going to scandalize people? How is it going to falsely affirm someone in their false belief that their homosexual relationship is actually good, causing them scandal? It's really down to the practical. And if it was just all in theory, they could just, navel gaze all they wanted about something like that. But it comes down to our Lord in Matthew 12:25 said, quote, "A house divided against itself shall not stand." And it seems like everywhere you look today, you see division. And of course, the meaning of diabolic is to divide, and the devil never sleeps. But we know the Catholic Church will stand until the end of time, so Christ must have a plan on how to unite that which has been divided. Perhaps he will use the fire foretold by Our Lady of Akita back in 1973 to weld together the gaps in the hull of the Bark of Peter. By the state of things, we shouldn't have to wait too long to find out how he's going to do that. Jules, thank you so much for getting us up to speed on this story and for your thoughtful analysis.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank Thanks again for watching today's episode of Rome Dispatch. This show is brought to you by donors like Real Estate for Life. If you're looking to buy or sell a home and want to support our mission, visit realestateforlife.org. Again, that's realestateforlife.org. Be sure to tell them Church Militant sent you. God bless.